Well, what Julie Gillard now is trying to do, of course, is to put the pressure back on Tony Abbott by saying that not only can he not unscramble the egg, but deep down he doesn't really want to, as she is.
The huffing and puffing we're seeing from the opposition, the statements about signatures in blood, all of that is to disguise the fact they've got their fingers firmly crossed behind their backs. Do you seriously think that Mr Abbott, who's been on the record as a supporter of carbon pricing, is really going to try and repeal this package? I think that's the question for focusing on.
I think he'll try.
I think he'll try, but there is a pragmatic problem, and it's the one he's facing on a lot of fronts. He's keeping a lot of what that carbon tax pays for in terms of tax cuts, increases in family payments, etc., and getting rid of the revenue that pays for them. I would, and by the way, he has to fund his own direct action thing, which is, he says, will cost $10.5 billion out to 2020. So he's got a pretty good pragmatic reason just to leave the thing alone.
Well, look, let's talk now about whether there has been a shift in sentiment, a shift in the mood. I think most of you guys are sworn off opinion polls, so I don't know how I'm going to get to the guts of this issue. But about it today. It's the guy in the castle says it's the vibe,
it's the
right?
Vibe out there.
Is there a vibe out there?
There's a vibe. There's a definite vibe. There's such relief in Labor ranks also at the fact that Julie Gillard has been able to do what John Howard, Brendan Nelson, Malcolm Turnbull, Kevin Rudd weren't able to do, and that's actually get some climate change reform through Parliament. She seems to be more confident. As she's surging ahead, Tony Abbott appears to be falling back. He's dissembling all over the place. He's reversing on policies like the superannuation guarantee. His mathematics is all over the joint. As Brian was just saying, you know, we'll keep the goodies but get rid of the tax. We'll do this, especially in the mining tax too. I mean, it really is. It's a shambles on the other side, and there is a real feeling in the ministry too that
I think there's another element that's just sort of, it's only happening gradually, but I think the messages from Wayne Swan and Penny Wong about this deep hole he's digging himself in a budget sense is starting to get through. And secondly, every time Wayne Swan, which seems to be every second week, appears at an international financial gathering, it's another sort of reminder that Australia is doing much better than certainly the United States or certainly Europe, and that really we haven't got all that much to whinge about. If you're living in the United States and you're a middle-class person, you wouldn't have had a wage increase, real wage increase for over 20 years.
That's the point, by the way, that Tony Abbott finally conceded, but in London.
Yes.
That, in fact, Australia's economy is the envy of the world. Because, and I think you particularly, George, don't want to analyse opinion polls, I'll just make this point, that the latest news poll, two-party preferred, 53 the coalition, 47 the government. Now, after some terrible polls for a long time, now you're at a situation where that's not particularly unusual. Lots of governments have come back from that position and won. I think that's what's changed.
You're trying to turn me into a politician. I'm going to have to dance around my ironclad guarantee not to discuss an opinion poll. Let me answer your question this way, Barry.
Hypothetically.
The reason why I swore off these things is that they are meaningless in the first year of a three-year term. And one of the reasons they're meaningless in the first year of a three-year term is that every new government governs in the first 18 months of the 3 years. And in that first 18 months, they take for granted the idea that they'll be behind the polls. Now, in the past, nobody paid attention to these polls because this seemed to be the normal thing. Everyone's been hung up almost from the day the Parliament was hung, pardon the double use of the word hung, because there's an expectation that there'll be an election any day now. Now, it turns out that my judgment call was probably right, that we haven't had an election in the first 12 months after the last election, so I'm not going to talk about these things anymore. You want to ask me another question? What's changed in the last couple of months? Body language? Yeah. Check out the body language. Julia Gillard finally looks like a Prime Minister who can talk about things that she's interested in, industrial relations, helping the low paid. Tony Abbott is now not looking like an opposition leader with an idea of where he'll take the country if he was Prime Minister tomorrow, but he's actually looking like a media commentator who's just been sprung on a couple of his previous articles, and he's running around saying, but I actually didn't say that, I'm going to say this. Now, the most interesting thing to me in the last week was the glass jaw. He headed straight overseas. Now, this was the fight that, if this is the most important fight to him, this is his reason for being as a politician. He should have been doing a doorstop every day for the last
should
week,
have
not
canned that trip.
jetting off to London.
He got zero publicity for that trip. And as you say, it was something where he has said, this is what I'm going to stake my political future on, and I'm going to hound the government through to the next election on this. I'm going to sign oaths in blood, etc. So for him to be out of the country, I think, was a really bad look.